Well, thanks, Carolyn, for inviting me this evening. So good evening. I hope everybody had a productive day today. Did everybody get everything done on their to-do list?
Oh, sure.
Anybody here feel overwhelmed, like your head's been in a blender after a busy day? Do you feel tired and confused, maybe indecisive, restless, or suffer from monkey brain? Oh, everybody's admitting to it. This is great. How many emails, alerts, and notifications did you get today? And how does that compare to 10 years ago? Well, if you're feeling overwhelmed, you're far from alone. Information overload is not an illusion. We deal with much more information today than we did even 5 years ago. Daniel Levitin, a neuroscientist at McGill University, published a new book last August called The Organized Mind, Thinking Straight in the Age of Information Overload. He launched his book at a presentation at U of T's Rotman School of Management last August, and he's also the author of the bestseller, This Is Your Brain on Music. You might have read that one in the past. In the book, he provides a comprehensive review of the amount of information we're bombarded with on a daily basis, why it's challenging for our brains to keep up, and what we need to do to take advantage of the science to enhance productivity. So I'm going to share some of his key learning from the book with you tonight. Consider these 4 facts about the amount of information we deal with today. 1. We take in the equivalent of about 174 newspapers worth of information every day, 5 times as much as we did in 1986. 2. We now have access to an almost infinite amount of information at our fingertips. By one estimate, we've created 300 exabytes of information. That's the number 300 with 18 zeros after it. 5 exabytes of new data were produced in January 2012 alone. 50,000 times the number of words in the entire Library of Congress. I don't know who bothered to add all that, but apparently that's the estimate. When you watch a video on YouTube for an hour, you fall 5,999 hours behind because every hour there's 6,000 new hours of videos. And 4, by one estimate, we've created more scientific information in the last 25 years than in all of history before that. And we may call this a cell phone, but the phone feature is now the 6th most common use. You know, making a phone call, remember that? So we have an infinite amount of information available at our fingertips on a 24/7 basis. So we can agree that information overload is a problem. The other problem? The way we try to drink from this fire hose of information is totally wrong. We try to cope by multitasking. Some job applications even ask for it. For somebody who can multitask, and some of us even brag about being able to juggle many things at once, like it's some badge of honor. So why is multitasking a bad way to cope when we have so much on our plates? Well, a bunch of neuroscientists have been conducting brain imaging studies to try to figure that out. Earl Miller at MIT and the late Clifford Nass at Stanford found out that when we multitask, we're not really doing things all at the same time. What we're really doing is fractioning our attention, switching back and forth, and all the while burning up brain glucose. You might be surprised to learn that the brain only weighs 3 pounds, but consumes 28% of all the energy your body uses in a day. All those neurons need glucose for energy. So if you burn it up switching back and forth all day, it leads to a bunch of problems. It releases the stress hormone cortisol, which can cause foggy thinking, anxiety, depression, and the release of adrenaline. That's that fight or flight hormone our ancestors needed to outrun a tiger, but we don't really need it today in the modern workplace. At least we hope not. If we burn up brain glucose too rapidly, we can feel tired and really burned out at the end of the day and likely craving junk food. Sound familiar? And your memory can be compromised. Studies show that students who multitasked while studying actually stored the information in the wrong part of the brain. Consider this little study by Harvard researchers who tracked the productivity of 2 workers over a 9-hour day using time management software. The first worker, a manager's dream, was significantly more productive than the other worker. Even though she switched tasks nearly 300 times, most of her switches were short, and she quickly returned to getting important work done. She even took an hour off for lunch. Over the day, she was productive 85% of the time. The second worker, who was unfocused and unproductive, only accomplished about 3 hours of productive work. He switched almost 500 times, which means he changed his focus almost once a minute, and was only productive 33% of the time. Yeah, this was only a small study with 2 people, so it's only anecdotal evidence. And while we might be tempted to think the variance in results might in part trace to gender differences, there's definitely something worth exploring here if we want to improve productivity. So let's bust a common myth about the brain. We do have a right and a left hemisphere, but popular culture still wants to categorize people as left brain or right brain dominant, where left brain people are considered strong in language and math, and right brain people are thought to be good at music and spatial reasoning. Researchers have debunked that by looking at brain images. They found that we don't use one side of the brain any more than the other, which makes a lot of sense because the 2 hemispheres are massively interconnected. Recently, neuroscientists discovered that what we really have are 2 brain networks. One is called the task-positive or the executive function mode for focus, and the second one is called the daydreaming mode, the mind-wandering mode that's responsible for creativity. Here's something that I'm sure has happened to you too. You're powering away on some important work and then you hit a roadblock or a problem. So you go and you do something else. You go for a walk or you get a snack, and then bam, a solution pops into your head. That's the daydreaming network. Daydreaming is not lazy. It's the brain mode that comes up with creative solutions to problems. Jeff Bezos dreamed up the idea about using the internet to boost mail order businesses while his wife was driving them somewhere on a long weekend, the July 4th weekend in 1994. He didn't dream up the idea behind Amazon at his desk. And perhaps you've heard the story about Archimedes, who was contracted to detect fraud in the manufacture of a golden crown. He had his moment of insight when he jumped into a bathtub and imagined how the displacement of water could be used to measure the amount of gold in the crown. And then he ran home naked through the streets yelling, "Eureka!" That's where the whole thing about a eureka moment came from. So during demanding tasks, the more the mind-wandering mode is suppressed, the greater the accuracy of performance on the task at hand. It actually takes less brain energy to focus on one task at a time than to multitask. An hour of daydreaming uses 11 calories, about the same as one of those energy-efficient light bulbs. Reading a book for an hour burns 42 calories. Sitting and paying attention in a class for an hour uses 65 calories. Well, that's pretty similar to what we're doing tonight, because we expend mental energy absorbing new information and connecting thoughts to others. So I hope you all had a good dinner before you came. Now let's talk about attention. Albert Einstein apparently once said, "Any man who can drive safely while kissing a pretty girl is simply not giving the kiss the attention it deserves." I'd like to think that's still true today. Except today we have lots of distracted drivers talking on their cell phones, or worse, texting with one hand while driving a motorcycle with the other. Like the fellow I passed on the 404 a few months ago. True story, I kid you not, a motorcycle. Lab studies at the University of Utah over the last decade have proven that distracted drivers have significantly poorer driving performance. Their reaction times are slower. They have trouble staying in their lanes and maintaining a good following distance, and they're more likely to run red lights. Or as I found out a year ago from the person who rear-ended my car when I was already stopped at a red light, more likely to smash into the one in front. Multitasking doesn't work because it divides attention. Attention has a cost. It's a this or that zero-sum game. When we pay attention to one thing, we are necessarily taking attention away from something else. And paying attention takes effort, which is why we feel so refreshed after we daydream or we take a nap. I have 3 more thoughts to share tonight. The first one. It takes less energy to focus than it does to switch. The problem, though, is that the very brain areas we need to stay on task are easily hijacked by shiny new things like social media, news feeds, alerts, notifications, and new emails. How many of you turn off your phone or your email for blocks of time during the day. It's very easy to get drawn into the addictive loop of short-term rewards and lose out on focusing on something that will produce a longer-term accomplishment. Number 2, the processing capacity of the conscious mind is 120 bits per second. That's the bandwidth in the brain for the traffic flow of information that we can pay conscious attention to at one time. We max out then when we try to follow 2 conversations at the same time, which may well explain why holiday dinners with lots of extended family members gathering around the table at the same time is so draining after a while. And number 3, little decisions can take up as much energy as big ones. So if you waste your time on a stream of insignificant decisions, you'll have little energy left when something important comes up. So to summarize then, we live in a world of information overload. There's no question that that's true. But multitasking is the wrong approach to handle the onslaught. With multitasking, we're not saving time, we're wasting it. What we need to do is understand how the brain works and take advantage of the neuroscience to maximize our productivity. So with that, I turn it over now to Luigi, who's going to share strategies you can use to enhance your productivity.
All right. By the way, that was part 1 for Jane. She'll come back up and talk a little bit about a few other things, including working at standing desks, but I'll let her handle the actual introduction there when the time comes. So what I'd like to shout about is, the topic's been introduced in terms of the theory, is actual practical techniques and processes that you can use to make sure that you stay productive, on task, single tasking throughout the day, and you actually get stuff done. By the way, that's actually a really good place to start. I'm not sure if anyone here knows of the book Getting Things Done by David Allen. I see a few heads nodding. If you get a chance, pick it up. I've gone through mine about 4 times, and it has sticky notes sticking out at weird angles all around the book, but get the ebook as well and you can annotate it. Getting Things Done. Now, there are a lot of books out there called Getting Things Done. The author's name is David Allen. That's the one that I'm recommending. One thing I want to make sure we set out straight ahead of time. My talk is not about the tools that you can use. What it's about is the best practices, the techniques, the processes you can use to help you manage your day. It's the practices that matter. As long as your tools let you adhere to those practices, I think you're in pretty good shape. So all that said, I'm going to cover 6 topics. I'll tell you what they are just in case that makes it easier for you to take notes tonight. Topic 1, making time for focus. Topic 2, my favorite tip for writing, or basically overcoming writer's block. Tip number 3, handling the nature of daily interruptions. Number 4, handling those interruptions. Number 5, a few thoughts about paper. If I have some time later on, I'll go a little bit into the tools I actually use and what I would recommend. I'm not saying they're perfect, but if I have time, I'll go through them and we can talk about them later if you like. So, making time for focus. There are actually 4 subtopics here. Topic number 1 is just focus time. One of the things we kind of tend to do is let good old rabbit mind go all over the place. So you might be editing something on screen and all of a sudden you got an email pop up coming in from somewhere, or a social media alert, or a text message alert on your phone, whatever it might be. There was an Italian fellow, and his name escapes my mind, who developed a technique called the Pomodoro technique. Pomodoro technique.com. Here's the basic idea. Grab an egg timer. You set it to 25 minutes, and during that 25 minutes you do one thing. You work on editing one thing, writing one thing, that's it. And you don't do anything else. Everyone here should be able to focus 25 minutes, right? When that 25 minutes is up, the egg timer rings, set it for 5 minutes, take a break. That's half an hour. 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off. That's the basics of the Pomodoro technique. That's it. And there's more to it at pomodorotechnique.com, so I won't waste your time explaining it more now. I'm personally doing right now 50 minutes working 20 minutes away as a break. And I just repeat that and repeat that and repeat that. And pretty soon my day's pretty much gone and I've actually got stuff done. On days when I manage to stay on track, which is not every day, I can admit, but it works when it works for me. The next topic in making time for focus is to prevent distractions. Tip number one, remember those notifications I told you about? Turn them all off, please. I'm serious. Turn them off. Turn off. You don't have to keep on going and checking email just because some little pop-up says you've got a new message. You remember what Jane said about bright, shiny things? That's part of what she's talking about. On my Mac, I could have email alerts, text message alerts, social media alerts. I could have phone calls coming through it. I turned almost all of that off except for text messages because they're really easy to respond to very quickly. I'll get back to that point later on. Turn off all those alerts. They will mess up your focus time like you would not believe. Use a tool to block distractions if you have to. My personal demons, news websites, and hockey news, although given the way the Leafs have been playing lately, it's been a lot easier to ignore it. A lot easier. There are a lot of tools out there that'll actually turn off the internet entirely, or if you still need something in particular, it'll actually block specific websites and leave other websites available and leave your email available if you want it. Number 3 is to make time for reading or just casual web surfing. Your brain kind of needs that time away, that change of pace. You can basically save online articles to a reading list if you want to. If something pops up, you want to take notice of it, save it to an online reading list, make a note of it, get back to work, knowing that you're not going to forget to read that thing later on. Then number 4 is, if you're not entirely sure you're managing, try to track your time usage. One way to do that is to take a page, and what you'll do is divide it down the middle. On the one side, whatever you plan to do that day at whatever times. On the other side is whatever your actual time spent is. So it's planned versus actual. And try that for a week, 2 weeks, longer. It'll give you an idea at the end of not just a day, but an extended period of time, whether you're actually getting work done. You don't have to be there all the time writing down what you're doing, but maybe once every half hour, just know what it is that you've been doing. Every hour, whatever works for you. So basically, when you're making time for focus, develop focus time, Pomodoro technique, prevent distractions, make time for reading or casual web surfing at another time, and track your time usage. My next topic is about writing, and the key thing I think a lot of people still face is this thing called writer's block. I actually don't get writer's block because, in a sense, I don't write in blocks. I write in little chunks, in little ideas. The concept is mind mapping, and I think some people here might be familiar with the concept. I'm going to put it in very analog terms. Give yourself a stack of 100 cue cards. A topic comes to you. By the way, just a quick show of hands. How many people here do have to draft stuff from time to time or organize ideas? So enough of you that this is actually worth mentioning. So, and I should introduce this by saying the ideas for a given topic never come to you in publishable order. If that makes sense. And then the idea will come to you, but then halfway through writing, you'll realize you've got to include 2, 3, 4 other ideas. So, give yourself a stack of 100 cue cards. Write one complete idea on a cue card, and you can put it on a table. Then write out another idea, and write all your ideas that pertain to that topic. And then on a table, order them in whatever order actually makes sense. whether you want to do it linearly, as though it were a hierarchy, whatever it is, where some ideas might become sub-ideas of a main idea. And as you're doing that, more ideas will come. You're not actually trying to force things into a given order. What you're doing is allowing the ideas to hit you in the order that they hit you, and grabbing them as quickly as you can, and then organizing them. That's a very analog way of looking at it. There are a lot of software tools out there that'll let you do that. There are a few free ones as well, and I'll mention a couple later on. But the key idea is that you can rearrange your cue cards, you can rearrange your ideas in any order you want. Don't get hung up on having everything come out publishable. It doesn't make any sense. The beauty of it is once your map is in the order you want, you can basically write from point to point to point to point, just joining everything together. And just get a first draft done. Once you get a first draft done, then it's just a matter of revision. But that's the way to avoid writer's block, the way I think it can be done. Your mileage may vary, but I recommend you at least give it a shot if you run into writer's block. My third main topic, handling daily interruptions. And when I say daily interruptions, the key ones I'm talking about are email and phone calls, primarily email. So 2 topics I want to cover on here. The first topic is, if you're looking for a heading for this, it's called Mind Like Water. Fast question. How many people here have more than 5 emails in your inbox? Keep your hand up if you've got more than 10.
You mean unread, or I don't usually delete mine?
Any. More than 15? 20? 25?
Oh, come on.
Well, this is hurting. Okay, let's put your hands down here. Again, this is one of the reasons why I like the David Allen book. They're very concrete ideas that I'm capable of going away with. Just develop in your own mind the picture of a very still pond. Okay? It's using no energy. You throw a pebble into the pond. The pond reacts by sending out ripples, because it has to react to the energy that has been expended upon it, that interruption to its existence. But then it goes back to being entirely calm once all that energy has been absorbed, and it just goes still again. If you take an email that comes to your inbox and you handle it right at that particular point in time, it's like throwing a pebble into the calm pond of your mind, having a ripple, and then having it go calm again so it can be devoted to other things. If you leave that email in there and you read it once, but then you leave it there and you maybe come back to it, it's kind of like that pebble gets tossed into the pond that represents your mind, but it continues to ripple and ripple and ripple, and it's going to stay on your mind until you handle it. Try to develop mind like water, because water doesn't behave that way. Comes in, try to handle it. And I'll give you some tips on how to do that later. All that segues into a concept that's called, and I forget who called it this, inbox zero. I know, I represent that 3rd grade teacher who hovered over you with that stick when you were a kid, I know. The concept is you should have no emails left in your inbox by the end of the workday. I confess I now have, when I left my office, I had 4 that I could come back to later on.
For shame.
I know, I'm really making myself the seminar piñata here, aren't I? It's the same thing with phone messages. It's the same thing with other interruptions that hit you. So when it comes to daily interruptions, 2 concepts to take away. One is mind like water, and the second is inbox zero. Which leads me to the 4th topic, which is handling interruptions, specifically email. So I'm going to give you 10 tips, and I'll number them for you. Okay? Tip number 1, it's actually so important I'm repeating it from earlier. Turn off your email alerts. Just make time 2, 3, 4 times during the day, whatever you're comfortable with, to handle email. But don't handle it right when it comes in. doesn't make any sense to do so. I'm just keeping notes as we go through, just to make sure I don't hit anything again. So the second thing is to make sure that you only check each email message once. They can be a tough habit to get into, and I haven't fully mastered it either. But make sure that if you can, you touch it and deal with it once. You process it, however it's got to be processed. Next tip, if the email or interruption only represents a task of X amount of time, my X is 2 minutes, I just do it right then and there. Get it out of the way, do it, and then what I can do is delete the email, or if I need to keep it, I can file it. But I get it out of my inbox. The next tip has to do with spam or marketing messages that are of no use to you. If you got a bunch of those in your inbox, decide whether you want to unsubscribe or just have them sent to a newsletter folder or a marketing folder. Call it whatever you want. But it's not the type of thing you have to act on right away. Get it out of your inbox, because I'm suspecting it's among the lower priority types of emails that you have. So that's, and especially when it comes to spam, by the way, mark stuff as spam. Don't be afraid to mark stuff as spam. Just a quick tip, actually, when it comes to spam, make sure you check your spam filters every day, because legitimate stuff might be getting caught in there. And if you really want to do a number on spammers and you don't want their stuff showing up in your email inbox anymore, mark it as spam, not in your email software like Outlook or Mac Mail or Thunderbird. Mark it as spam on the webmail client, whether it's Gmail, Hotmail, Yahoo Mail, whatever it is. That's where you actually prevent it from flowing into your inbox. Next tip, let's say the email message contains an appointment. I'm up to number 5 now. I hope I actually counted properly up to 10. It's this affliction writers have. If it contains an appointment of some sort, create an entry in your calendar for it. And in a lot of electronic calendars, you can attach the email to that calendar entry so you have context. Once it's there, oh, and by the way, you can also save a lot of text in the notes field of a calendar entry. Once it's there, delete it or file it, but get it out of your inbox. So that was number 5, calendar. A couple other calendar tips is that you can also invite other meeting attendees to the appointment if you're using an electronic calendar. Makes sense, pops up in their calendar, shows that you're professional, you're on the ball. For some reason, every now and then, those calendar invitations don't work properly, which is one of those pet peeves I have, in the sense that we're in an age where we have emails that can be read by any email tool out there, and yet we can't have calendar files that get properly read by every single piece of calendar software out there. Anyways, that's my tech geek rant for the night. Once it's out of there, file or delete the message. Number 6, if the message contains a task, put the task in your task list for the appropriate day when you need to do it. The beauty of tasks is, the difference between a task and an appointment is that a task doesn't have a specific time and date necessarily attached to it. So you've got some flexibility as to when you can do it. I recommend you do a little load balancing. If you have a day that's heavy on appointments, for instance, make it light on tasks. And if you have other days where you have more time to work on this kind of thing, load it up with tasks, just to make sure you don't have days where you're entirely freaking out, and other days where you could go to take really extended naps. Once that email task is on your task list, file the message in a folder or delete it. Your call. Number 7, if the email contains contact information, especially email signatures, put that stuff in your contact application or your address book, whatever it is. You're not going to find that stuff if it's sitting in your inbox. Just the same way that you're not going to find calendar appointments and you won't find tasks. Any of that information. Put it in your contact list where you're actually going to find it. Okay? Once, it's a really good idea, by the way, especially with contact info, put the email itself in the notes field of your contact, because that'll give you context around how you know this individual. Just because you might want to have that. Once it's done, I know I'm redundant, either file the email or delete it. Get it out of your inbox. Another thing you might want to consider, just for the fun of it, if the person might be a good LinkedIn connection, why not? Next element is with regards to folders. Now, I didn't actually mention this earlier, but the fact is, I presume everyone here understands the concept of a folder as it applies to email, as it applies to Windows Explorer, as it applies to the Mac Finder. You can keep folders, and that's fine. I have a fairly sophisticated folder structure that basically rolls up to 3 top-level folders, which are freelance, non-urgent reading, and personal. Just so you know how this works. For me, non-urgent reading, the personal one, doesn't usually have a lot in there. It's 1, 2, 3, maybe unread. Freelance usually has 0 because I get to those right away every single time. Non-urgent reading, I think I've got more than 1,000 unread in there, but because it's not urgent, I don't care. You send me a newsletter, I'm not really gonna, worry too much about it. So number 8 is make sure you've got folders. Number 9, try using email rules. Rules can do a lot of things. One thing they can do is automatically send emails to specific folders, and don't worry about missing them, because it won't mark them as unread. So you'll have an unread count next to that folder, so you'll know that you've got emails waiting for you. One of the tricks I use is if I'm working on a specific project, I will send out emails with a certain subject line that has the name of that project. And what I'll then do is I'll create a rule that says if email subject line has this text, file it in the appropriate project folder. This is really handy for the last point I'm going to mention. It's a really simple thing, especially because most people don't really bother to change subject lines, so you're safe. So that's email rules. Well, another interesting one, another good one is, it actually is a rule. Your own spam filter and your own software, that kind of is a rule. And when you mark stuff as spam, it'll just send stuff into the spam folder. Or you can just have an email when it comes from a specific address or has specific text. You can just have it deleted and then stop running any other rules. And then my last 10th tip would be the sent items folder. Sent items is stuff, may contain stuff that you need to keep. You can't just keep your inbox clean. Sometimes you got to clean up sent items. Anyone here, so I should take a step back. You might actually want to file stuff in the sent items folder, which means you can manually drag and drop to different folders. If you use a lot of rules, one of the things you can do is highlight everything in your sent items, right click, choose apply rules, and let your mail software just file everything. Yeah. It's said that progress is made by the truly lazy looking for easier ways to do things, and I'll let you draw your conclusions about the presenter as you wish. So then you can review the other messages in sent items, and if you don't need them, trash them. This way you're keeping both your sent items and your inbox clear, because sometimes the stuff you send is stuff you need to keep track of. I'll do a real fast run over of the review of those 10 tips. So number 1, email alerts off. I think I mentioned checking messages only at set times. 2-minute tasks, get them out of the way. Handle spam and marketing messages. Create appointments from emails. create tasks from emails, create contacts, information from emails, use folders, use email rules, especially to file these things, and clear your sent items folder. So that's the basics in terms of handling email. I know I went pretty quickly in there. Don't worry, I've got a backup on that. When it comes to paper, which is my 5th major topic here, I only really have 2 things to say about it. Number 1 is the fact that a lot of people love to have paper calendars and contact books, address books. I think that's fine. It's great that you have that system in the first place because you need that system. And if it works for you, that's great. I used to use a really massive binder back in the day. And then I tried traveling when I had to do some business travel with it. And it's a pain to pack. What I found out was that I could take a Palm Pilot, I don't know if you remember those, late 90s, put it in a shirt pocket, and all of a sudden I had all this extra room in my carry-on. So that's one of the key reasons why I got into it. Aside from the fact that it's a lot smaller, the reason I am going to offer to you to switch to an electronic tool is this. It's not the actual tool itself that matters, it's the information in it. Your appointments, contacts, tasks, whatever you keep. If I lose my iPod Touch, which has all this information for me, or my iPad, it's a pain. I'll be annoyed because it costs money, but I can replace the tool and I can download everything again because I've got it backed up elsewhere, because I backed this stuff up. I'm willing to bet really good money that no one who has a paper agenda ever backs it up. I can't see people going to the local Kinko's, slap it on the, on the photocopier, do a copy, and then bring it out. I can't see people doing that like once a week. It's not going to happen. I don't care if you have a scanner at home or what it is. Again, it's good that you have the tool, but have backups of that information. Please have backups. The second is with regards to paper and its relationship to productivity. I've heard a fair amount on what are called paperless offices. Now the truth is, we're about as likely to see paperless offices in our lifetime as we are to see paperless bathrooms. But that being said, the less paper you involve in your processes, generally, the more productive you happen to be. There's also the fact that you can do a lot more with the information when it is in electronic form. You can easily mark up documents if you want on screen. You can sign PDFs on screen with a whole bunch of free tools. It's easier to back it up, obviously. One of the things I like to do is, if I want to know what somebody looks like before I actually meet them, I'll get their LinkedIn profile picture and I'll drag it into my contacts app that synchronizes to my mobile tools, and then I know. Can't do that with paper anywhere near as easily. So those are the basic things with regards to paper. Number 1, try to migrate away from paper agendas if that's what you use. And number 2, try to get paper out of your workflows where you can. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I understand a lot of people like to edit on paper, I do too. But where it's not necessary, try to get it out of your way. I haven't given myself enough time to talk about the tools I use, so I'll turn the floor back over to Jane right now, but if you have any questions, let me know.
Okay, thanks, Luigi. So I'm going to talk now about some healthy habits that'll help you stay productive. I'm going to talk about naps, I'm going to talk about the importance of daily activity, and I'm going to talk about using a standing desk. So naps, how many of you reach for a cup of coffee to beat the mid-afternoon slump? Just about everybody? A British study found that people who took naps performed better on word recall tests than those who drank caffeine instead. That's pretty compelling, since we all work with words all day. So the next time you're thinking of powering through with a slump with a jolt of caffeine, you might want to try a nap instead. Now I realize it's hard to take a nap in an employer's workplace. But I have to say that taking a nap is one of the wonderful benefits of working as a freelancer. You can take a nap and nobody knows. Tech companies like Google actually have napping pods that people can sign into for a nap in the workplace because they understand that this really helps. And in other settings, you could book a meeting room and close the door. Sleep researchers find that daytime naps improve many, many things. Here's a list of 10. Alertness, creativity, memory, perception, stamina, motor skills, accuracy, weight loss, your sex life, and they reduce stress. There's a lot to like in that list of benefits. There are some do's and don'ts with naps though. A 20 to a 30-minute power nap is the best for hitting the reset button to help you feel more alert. It's short and you only reach a light sleep stage, so you'll wake up feeling refreshed. In a 60-minute nap, the light sleep stage is followed by slow wave deep sleep. This length of time is good for improving memory, like if you're studying for a test where recall matters. So the downside though is that you can wake up groggy and it'll take you a while to come back up to speed. You know, you're sort of foggy. In a 90-minute nap though, you'll go through a full sleep cycle consisting of light sleep, slow wave, and then REM sleep, which is good for improving creativity and implicit memory, that kind of memory that you use to program automatic things like riding a bike. So there's no benefit to sleeping longer than 90 minutes in a nap either, because you'll just start a whole new sleep cycle. And the time of day you nap matters too, because our brainwave composition changes over the day. If you nap too late in the day, you're more likely to wake up groggy, because the nap will have too much slow wave sleep in it. So as a tip, if you normally get up at about 7 in the morning, your best time to nap is probably around 2 in the afternoon. So let's talk about daily activity. Albert Einstein, gee, look at that guy is again. He was a good example of a mind in motion. His theory of relativity didn't come to him sitting at a desk. He thought up the famous E = mc squared while he was riding his bike. Or so the story goes. I don't know if it's true. I'm a big believer in making sure I fit some physical activity into my day, and I track my step count with my Fitbit band. Yeah, I'm a convert. My goal is 10,000 steps a day, and I usually meet or beat that goal. Studies find, though, that 3 20-minute walks are better than one 1-hour walk. So I fit it in when I can, and I don't worry about trying to do it all at once. And an added bonus is that walking goes well with that mind-wandering mode I was talking about before. Gives me a chance to just let go and unfocus for a while. And funny, a whole bunch of things start occurring to me while I'm walking. Okay, so let's talk about standing desks. But first, you know, I'd like everybody to stand up. Everybody's been sitting for too long. So stretch. And if you want to stay standing while I keep talking the rest, that's okay with me. So feel free to sit down when you wish, or stay standing. It won't bother me in the slightest, because hey, I'm up here standing up. I first learned about standing desks from Stéphane Denis. Stéphane is now partner in a handful of executive search firms, but many years ago we were colleagues working in consumer brand marketing at Procter & Gamble. In 2009, I met with Stéphane to learn about how he trained for the Gobi March. It's an extreme desert race where participants, they compete in a grueling 250-kilometer race over 7 days in the desert. It's crazy. And they must carry their own supplies for the duration of the race. One of his surprising training strategies was to switch to a standing desk. He even wore a weighted backpack at work months before the race to simulate race conditions. I can't remember what it was, 60 pounds, and he'd work that way all day, standing at his desk with a 60-pound backpack on his back. He recommended that I read James Levine's book called Move a Little, Lose a Lot. Levine is an endocrinologist at the Mayo Clinic, and he's the inventor of the first treadmill desk. And I'll talk a bit about that if I have time at the end. He and his research team had people wear special undergarments with sensors that measured energy output, and it's his research that found that standing burns 3 times as many calories as sitting. And the more times that you ignite your metabolism in a day by moving, the better your cardiovascular results and the better your calorie burn. Soon after that, I began to read studies from researchers around the world, basically, about the health risks of sedentary behavior. I made the move to my own standing desk in the summer of 2011, and I wrote about the health risks of too much sitting in 3 different publications with 3 different story angles. The first was for GE Healthcare in the US. So you've probably heard by now that sitting is the new smoking, or you've read about sitting disease. The landmark study that was published in 2009 found that people who sit most of the day have twice the risk of heart attack, twice the risk of developing type 2 diabetes, twice the risk of dying from any cause at all. They call it all-cause mortality. And later studies have also found a higher risk of cancer. Levine wrote that sitting is also a major cause of neck and back pain. When we sit for extended periods of time, our back muscles loosen, our hips get tight, and our legs get stiff and weak, so over time we can become hunched over like Cro-Magnon man. What was most surprising from the landmark study, though, was that these risks were true even for people who were meeting their weekly guidelines for moderate to vigorous physical activity. And in Canada, that's 150 minutes a week. So in practical terms then, this study results said that even if you pound out a 5K on the treadmill for half an hour, if you sit on your duff for the rest of the day, you're at risk. And most of us sit for most of the day. Except for these lovely other people who are still staying standing. You get the lucky you can win the prizes there. The average Canadian sits for 9.5 hours a day, about 70% of waking hours. So what happens in the body when we sit all day? Well, researchers analyzed blood samples from people who had been sitting for several hours, and here's what they found. They found elevated levels of sugar and fat. When we sit for a few hours, the transport proteins and enzymes that normally move sugar and fat out of our blood and into our cells where they can be burned for energy start to shut down. If we sit for the entire day, their activity levels drop by 50%. Then if we eat a high sugar or a high fat meal, or both, blood sugar rises too high and the pancreas starts pumping out excess insulin to try to keep up. And blood fats skyrocket by 180%. When our body can't use the energy we eat as fuel, it leads to health problems like diabetes, heart disease, and excess fat storage, particularly in the abdominal area. The great news is Levine's research found that the simple act of moving, like getting up out of your chair, is all it takes to switch those enzymes back on again. So I'm going to tell you about my standing desk now. For my first effort to build a standing desk, I didn't want to spend any money until I knew it would work for me. So I tried an experiment with things I already had. I measured where I wanted the tabletop to be with my elbows at a 90-degree bend for typing on my keyboard, and I put stacks of old textbooks under each table leg to raise the desk up. It was quite a production because it was a big old heavy desk. So I had to measure 4 different stacks of books to make sure they were all the same height. But you know, it was a good way to do an experiment. It worked, and I loved it. But then I had no option to sit down when I was tired. And it takes a while to work up to being able to stand more than sit in a day. Besides, it's not really good to stand all day either. Just ask anybody who works at a job where that's necessary, like somebody who works in a factory or a restaurant. So after checking out some sources online, I hacked together my standing desk with parts I bought at IKEA. A large tabletop, which is about 5 feet by 2.5 feet, and 4 extendable chrome legs. And I got a bar stool. All in, it cost me about $255. And I adjusted the legs so that the tabletop for me is about 43 inches off the floor. That's just right for my height. Yours, you know, yours will be different. And the bar stool tucks under the table when it's not in use. And I alternate between standing and sitting. So my computer's pushed back towards the wall, and I have a nice area in front for my keyboard and to the side for reference materials for project things that I'm working on. So here are 4 tips from Wired Magazine about the optimal setup for a stand-up desk. Number 1, your computer screen should be about 20 to 28 inches from your eyes. Number 2, your screen should have a tilt of about 20 degrees. Number 3, your eyes should be level with the top third of your screen. And number 4, your elbows should be at about that 90-degree bend.
Question? Which way is the tip of the screen?
The top is away from a little bit. Yeah. So there are lots of variations of IKEA hacks for standing desks on the internet. I posted a blog on my website at janelangille.com that details a lot of information about standing desks that you can refer to. Some of the things that I've been sharing with you this evening. Last November, IKEA launched a new motorized stand desk, adjustable one, in the US, and it's called the Bekant Ergonomy. It's B-E-K-A-N-T, ergonomy, which I guess is like the word ergonomic with the C missing. And it looks great. It'll cost around $600 or $700 here, and it's much more reasonably priced than many of the other motorized models on the market. It's not available in store in Canada yet, but if you call the store, you can order one. They just don't have any in the warehouse or the showroom to show you yet, because it's still coming. So perhaps you're not convinced that a standing desk will be right for you. Oh, I see some smiles. I think many of you know Catherine O'Moore-Klump, a freelance medical copywriter in the US. She started using a sit-stand desk in 2012, and she hasn't looked back. And together with other healthy lifestyle changes, she's lost a significant amount of weight. She's reduced her diabetes medication, and she says she has more stamina, sleeps better at night, and doesn't get drowsy or bored while working. And yes, I did ask her permission to talk about her tonight. And most of the tech companies are using adjustable sit-stand desks for all the employees, from senior managers on down to the interns, at places like LinkedIn and Google in the Silicon Valley. So I'll touch a little bit on treadmill desks. Someday, I'd really like to own a treadmill desk. I tried one out at a Steelcase event a couple of years ago. It was easier to use than I thought. They only go a max of two miles an hour, so it's a pretty slow walk. And they're really quiet, so you could take a phone call on one. I'm not sure I'd want to do an interview of somebody for a story on one, but it would be certainly possible to type. I was taking notes on my iPad while I was walking on it, and it was certainly doable. They're pricey though. They cost about $3,500 to $4,000, the same cost as a cubicle station. So if you have a full-time job, you might consider asking your employer about getting one for the office that everyone can sign up for to use, sign in for a half-hour go. Make a lot of sense to share it around. So to summarize, tonight we've talked about the brain science of why multitasking is a myth, strategies that you can use to improve your health and productivity. And if you would like more information about what we covered tonight, you can check out our websites. I know Luigi posted a blog about his tips as well, and we're happy to answer questions from the audience. Oh, and the other thing I'd mention is Luigi has a standing desk too. Rachel.
I was just going to say you can do a treadmill desk for a lot less than that.
Can you?
Yeah, because you can do a similar
I was looking
exercise.
at the Steelcase one.
Well, yeah, you could if you buy one of theirs.
Yeah.
A lot of people hack them.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can. I have one.
Oh, you do?
I don't use it enough, but.
So what brand is it, or where did you find it?
I got the treadmill from one of the companies, Lifespan.
Okay.
But the desk I just created myself, doing similar to what you did.
Okay.
With like IKEA legs and props and everything. So.
Oh, good for you. That's
so
great.
Their desk is expensive, but if you get you can get like the treadmill through Amazon on sale, or you can just find like a very small treadmill. Especially the treadmills that they build specifically for walking, like that aren't heavy duty enough for running.
Right.
So you can do a treadmill desk for not, the ones that they sell for use in offices are like mechanical, so they can raise the, like they'll get one, they're set up so that a company can buy one and then anyone in the company can use it, and so the desk has to be adjustable at a moment's notice, right? But I don't adjust mine because it's just there. Right,
well you made it right for you.
Yeah, and then I just sit at a table with a laptop when I don't want to use the treadmill anymore.
Oh, that's great, good for you.
Yeah. It's hard to write though.
Yeah.
I can edit, I have trouble. It's hard to be creative and write.
Okay.
So I can edit things, I can manage product. Yeah, I just can't focus. I think if it was my own writing, but when I'm writing for other people and it's like, oh, I don't want to write this, I have to sit down and do it. But managing projects and editing, I can do on the treadmill.
Cool, great. Okay. Sure.
Oh,
I don't know. I mean, there might be questions for Luigi too, so I don't know. Do you want to field the questions, Carolyn, or
Sure.
do you want to just say who you
Well,
want
yeah,
to
just say-
answer
say, yeah,
questions?
if you have someone in particular you want to ask it to,
Or
just
do
say
you want to
their
come
name
over to the
first.
mic too, or I don't know.
I want to know
Sorry.
if you know about kneeling chairs. Like, what is a standing more beneficial than kneeling? A kneeling chair?
I don't know about a kneeling chair. Do you?
I've used a few. My girlfriend actually has one that she used in order to get over her back injury years ago. And she took it out of her basement, said, you know, give it a shot. And I actually like it a lot better than an ordinary sitting chair. It also kind of makes you get up. Makes me get up automatically every half hour or so, just because after a while it gets to be a bit annoying to be on you're essentially kneeling, if you will, and you're not actually kneeling with your knees on the ground. You're kneeling with your knees about, let's say, 6 inches to a foot off the ground, and then your feet are touching the ground, your toes are. And this model is actually kind of cool because it's a bit of a rocker thing. It's not stable, so I can rock back and forth a little if I choose to. And it works, but your mileage may vary.
More questions?
So, how long do you recommend standing for, or how long do you use the standing desk for?
I just worked up to what worked. I just tried to do it for as long as I could, and you know, I worked up to being able to stand for probably most of the morning, and then I alternate more in the afternoon when I'm tired. I mean, it's up to you.
I want to know, do you guys think this is a good habit or a bad habit? I tend to listen to music when I edit, not when I write, unless the writing has to do with the music. So there's certain types of editing that I can do while listening to music and more substantive, too much going on. And I tend to listen to non-English music because I only speak English, so I can't understand anything. Is it a good idea or a bad idea to be listening to music while?
I don't know who wants to. Do you want to take a run at this too?
Like with a lot of things, the rules I said earlier with regards to things like turning off notifications, that for me is very black and white. When it comes to listening to music when you work, your mileage may vary. I like listening to Baroque music and this class of music called chill, which it involves music, largely instrumental, no vocals that you could possibly sing along to or get the tune going in your head, because that'll distract you. I think that's the key. No lyrics. Lyrics, thank you. Especially lyrics that you can understand.
Spanish music that
Yeah, I'm a little SOL in that, in the sense that I speak 4 languages, but I listen to Baroque. My current favorite right now, if you want to give it a shot, works for me. You can get it on iTunes. It's called oh goodness, Vivaldi. The word Vivaldi is in the title. In any case, it's a really good streaming. And I'm not sure why Baroque music works better than most. It just seems to. And just whatever doesn't have lyrics, that doesn't make you bop your head, that doesn't work either. Speaking from experience.
Yeah, I would agree with that. If it has words, it's totally distracting. I start singing along, even just in my head, maybe out loud sometimes, because it's just me. But yeah, but then sometimes I'll put on some classical in the background and play it low, and that can be very soothing. And then I can really sink into some work. Other times I just totally need really quiet. So do what works for you.
I'll add 2 things. The one is the name of the radio station, Adagio Vivaldi, A-D-A-G-I-O, Vivaldi. And the one time I don't listen to music is when I have to transcribe stuff, and for obvious reasons. And a lot of third thing, I have a Pomodoro timer that actually ticks, and that ticking is something I have trained, and I'm still training myself after 4 or 5 years of using it to signal that this is quiet, focus time on one task. So that ticking sound, it's not music, but it is noise, I consider it white noise and it doesn't bother me. Again, your mileage may vary.
I just want to say, I use the Pomodoro app sometimes too when I need to focus, and I can't stand that ticking. I have to turn it off because it's like tick, 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 tick.
Yeah.
So it depends what's going to work for you.
I just want to add, CBC has a free streaming audio, and they actually have their own channel. So if you get tired of Vivaldi, you can listen to some, other composers as well. And the other thing that I used to recognize is something called cognitivity, which stimulates the sound of being in a cafe. It's really lonely sometimes. Yeah. Turn on Twitter, because that's distracting. But it's weird, but if you find it's too quiet so you don't listen to music, if you look for it, it's like productivity with coffee at the beginning. Cognitivity. Pretty handy and weird.
I just have a couple of, not really questions, but a couple of comments about the study you mentioned and also this focus question. I'm a committed stander. I left my house at 6:45. I haven't sat down. So I stand a great deal. But one of the things with that study, I think there was one problem that it didn't factor out people whose job requires them not to stand. So that 9.5-hour average is really skewed unless your job, you're on a factory floor or you're waiting tables or whatever, because they're all figured into the average. So I think there's other studies that show that unless you have a job that requires that, most of us sit more like 12 hours a day. So one of the things you might do, I've done this, some days, I don't do this obsessively every day, but some days I use the stopwatch for my phone. And every time, if I get up to get a glass of water, right, but every time I sit down for more than a minute, I just put the stopwatch on. And you might be really shocked at how many hours you actually are sitting. It's really hard to, for me, I have to make that conscious effort. So my goal of the day is that I stand approximately the same number of hours that I don't stand. Not saying I achieve that every day. There's lots of days I never get off the couch. But it's really quite shocking because I thought that I stood a lot. I often stand to eat. I rarely sit on the subway or the streetcar. I'm that crazy lady who's standing. And even though I do that, when I started using the stopwatch, I was really shocked at how many times a day I actually was not standing. You don't want to try that if you're just curious in your own mind, do I really sit down?
Well, there's some desktop apps you can use actually if you want some other timer things. Pomodoro works well. There's one called Break Time for Mac. It costs $4.99. I don't know if you want to do that, or for your iOS devices for $2.99. And there's another one called Break Taker for PCs, and it's free.
But one comment about those things are sort of useful if your goal is to be standing while you're working. But the handiness of the phone, if I decide to sit on the subway going home, I just turn stopwatch on. And I know when
so it's always with you
then. I know that I've sat 6 hours or 9 hours. Or whatever it is.
Smart.
With something like break time, is that something you can be tracking your work time as well?
I don't know. I haven't used it.
So I can speak to that. I actually wanted to hijack this just for a minute. We were talking about the expense earlier of treadmill desks. For those of you who aren't that interested, some years ago I had to rehab an ankle. And what I did was I was working at an office at the time. I used a colleague's board, which is about yay big, and it had 2 half-moon pieces of wood underneath that allows you to balance like this. Now, that's a form of exercise as well. If you guys want to Google this on Indiegogo, there's a project called The Level. Now, they have achieved their funding. It's a board with metal underneath that tapers down to a point from the 4 corners and allows you not just to go side to side, but to go forward and back and to twist if you choose to. They're selling it for $400. The only thing keeping me back right now is that it's a little pricey, but it actually it would sit a lot lower than the board I had mentioned, and it is exercise when you just keep yourself moving a little bit, because as you shift your balance, you are using some muscle. And it seems that $400 a lot cheaper than a treadmill. With regards to tracking, there are two. You could definitely track stuff in a notebook. What amount of time you work on different things. And those of us, for instance, with iPhones, you know that you can basically hold down the button, home button, say set timer for 30 minutes, and away you go. There's a tool that I use, and it's called Pomodoro app. That's the actual name of it, Pomodoro app. And not only do you set a Pomodoro, but you can say what it is you plan to accomplish during that Pomodoro. And then when you mark that task as completed, you can go back and see just how much time you spent on that given task. So it accomplishes two things. Number one, you set your work time, your focus time, and number two, you track the amount of time you spend on a given task. Could help for building for clients if you chose to use it that way.
We got a few more questions.
I remember a few years ago I kept hearing for the sitting issue of using a stability ball to stay while you're working. And I've tried that, and I found I just ended up kind of like rolling around and sitting like this sort of on it. I never really maintained my posture.
Yeah.
And I don't hear as much about it, about people recommending stability balls. And I was just wondering whether it's just me being late. Like, if you sit on it properly, or does it really make any kind of difference? Or
Well, I think it's more active than sitting in a chair.
Yeah.
And I interviewed a lady who is CFO for Good Life Fitness for a story I did a couple years ago now. And she said someone in her office, and she requires everybody who comes to meet with her to have one too. So she's a big believer in one. It works for her. I think but I think she's probably making sure her posture stays right.
Yeah,
and I think if you're going to slouch on it, it's probably defeating the purpose, and it's time to get up and switch to something else.
yeah, so I guess I found it didn't make me sit any different than I would in a chair, just because it was just as comfortable as a chair. So I just kind of roll back.
I just wanted to mention that apropos of ball, that the most extreme example I was with my dental hygienist sits on a ball when she works on me.
That's a trust.
I've got a lot of trust in her. I was going to say a different approach to sort of being somewhat active when you're at your desk. My wife has a little thing called a desk cycle, which is a little exercise bicycle that goes under your desk.
Oh, I love one of
It's
those.
very good. She doesn't really use it when she works at the computer, but when she's sitting on a conference call, or times when she's had to sit for a long time. And she could be standing or walking around too, but she finds it gets the heart pumping and stuff like that. It doesn't help with the posture and the spine and all that stuff.
Right.
But that piece gets your, and it's much cheaper than a treadmill.
And so what kind is it, and where do you find one?
I found it online. Actually, I bought it for her.
Okay.
Yeah, for a Christmas present.
How much was it, if you don't mind me asking?
Two something, I think. And I think I had it shipped for Vancouver, maybe. But I think it's called Desk Cycle.
Okay.
Again, I can't give it a wholehearted recommendation because, first of all, it's not standing. It is sitting. You sit and pedal.
But it's moving. It's incorporating movement into the day. It's still healthy.
You're getting the blood circulating and the heart pumping and all that stuff. But it's also cheaper. And they advertise that it fits under your desk so that your knees don't knock on the top of the desk. But my wife says she has to push back a bit. And then it's got a little strap that attaches between your chair and the thing so you don't push yourself. Anyway, it's only been in service for about 3 weeks now, but she seems to like it. She uses it a lot on conference calls.
Does she let you borrow it sometimes?
Well, I got other activities.
Okay. That's cool, thank you.
I was just going to say, I think I saw something like that at Shoppers Home Health, as it was on special a couple of years ago. It was definitely a bicycle pedal sort of thing that goes under the desk, and it was like, I don't know, $50 or something.
Wow.
It wasn't probably very rudimentary, but still.
I'm wondering how do you deal with like flash monitors? So that you mentioned there should be like certain like 70-degree view angle like when you look at the monitor. But like if the screen is like workday, then like there's a huge difference between when you
I'm sorry, I'm really having trouble hearing you.
I think the question's about the size of the monitor. Does that?
How do you like deal with like the viewing angle, like proper viewing angle issue, like when you
Well,
have
I've got a
like a big screen.
I've got a big screen computer,
like when
and
you look at
it's about, I measured it because I thought if I'm going to be talking about it, I make sure mine's right, and it's about 20 to 28 inches away from where my eyes are, and it's fine.
Right, but I mean there's like a huge difference in terms of viewing angle, like when you look at the top and when you look at the bottom.
The angle.
Oh.
It's tilted at about 20 degrees away, this way, the top.
Right.
And my eyes are level with about the top third of the screen. And I don't seem to have trouble looking up and down, but yeah, I'm into progressive lenses here. So maybe that's part of my secret, I don't know. Am I answering your question?
I guess so.
More questions? Are we all questioned out? Okay. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you to Jane and Luigi. Thank you very much. And I want to also you should check they both have blogs on these topics, so you can check their websites. They're both got them posted up there now.